You were never meant to hear this. This story wasn't whispered. It was sealed, buried beneath stone and oath. But once you know, you can't unknow. And once it opens inside you, nothing stays the same. Deep in the frost-bitten veins of Appalachian Kentucky, where the land itself seems to breathe with memory, there exists a shadow that never lifts. A name spoken with hesitation, feared even in death. Riddle. This is not folklore. This is not myth. This is something older than both. In the winter of 1847, when most settlers fought to survive the cruel mountains, a pale figure named Ezekiel Riddle arrived with his family in Pike County. They didn't struggle. They didn't plead with the earth for mercy. They took, and the land gave. But what it gave, it didn't give freely. No one knows where the Riddles came from. Not truly. Some said they were from the Carolinas. Others whispered old-world bloodlines. But their eyes, those eyes, were not the eyes of men bound by geography. They were the eyes of something remembering, something ancient, watching. The Riddles thrived when others starved. Their crops burst from cursed soil. Their livestock birthed twins, fat and hale. Their children never coughed, never limped, never feared. While cholera tore through Pike County, the Riddle estate stood untouched, their candles burning long into the blackest nights, casting no shadows. And yet it wasn't their immunity that stirred unease. It was their control. Dr. Jeremiah Walsh, a circuit physician, visited once. Only once. His notes, discovered posthumously and never published, revealed something more than medicine. He described Riddle children who spoke like scholars, moved like dancers, and finished each other's sentences with eerie timing. They touched fire, handled snakes, laughed without blinking. And when Ezekiel Riddle spoke, Walsh wrote it, sounded like 10 voices woven and into one, like something speaking from inside the marrow of your own bones. The Riddles acquired land rapidly, too rapidly. Property deeds signed by men who swore they'd never agreed. Silver coin payments that local bankers couldn't trace. Mines producing ore so pure, geologists refused to sign the reports. Coal that burned cold blue, leaving behind not ash, but symbols, etched into steel and bone. You see, this wasn't about money. Not really. It was about presence. Ownership, influence. The land twisted around them, like a dog showing its throat. And time didn't work the same on Riddle soil. There are stories of men who walked into Riddle land and came back wrong, with different voices, with no memory, or worse, with memories that weren't theirs. This is your first warning. The Riddle family didn't merely survive. They changed the terms of what it meant to be human. They redefined the game while everyone else was still learning the board. This is not about Appalachia. It's not about one cursed family. It's about control, generational, spiritual, psychological. You felt it. The unspoken force behind power, the pattern behind systems. That voice in your head that says, stay quiet, don't ask. Look away. That's not yours. It never was. And the Riddles? They owned that voice. They cultivated it. You're not watching this by accident. You're hearing a bell that was buried before your grandfather was born. You're being called. You ready to go deeper? Because the real horror hasn't even started. They say power corrupts. But what if the corruption came first, and power was merely its expression? Ezekiel Riddle wasn't born in Kentucky. He didn't grow up like other men. He arrived, fully formed, fully aware, and already speaking in sevens. 7 rules, 7 names, 7 scars carved into his chest, with a bone knife no blacksmith could identify. Witnesses said he looked no older than 40, but his posture carried the exhaustion of someone who had lived centuries and enjoyed none of it. When Ezekiel first appeared in Pike County in 1847, he didn't beg. He didn't barter. He declared. He walked onto unclaimed wooded land, stabbed a bloodied stake into the soil, and said, "This is ours." No paperwork, no negotiation. And yet, no one challenged him. The land obeyed. Trees bent. Crows gathered. The local sheriff, John Tulliver, marched up to confront him. 3 days later, Tulliver was found on the edge of a ravine, eyes burned white, muttering a name that no one could repeat without weeping. He never recovered. It was the first of 19 public breakdowns tied directly to encounters with Ezekiel Riddle. 18 of those men died. The last one walked into a church and clawed out his own tongue. This wasn't charisma. This was compliance by contagion. Ezekiel didn't build a house. He raised an estate, Grey Haven, from stone that had no quarry, timber that hadn't been felled, and nails that left no rust. Locals watched in horror and awe as his family, 6 children and a woman known only as Mother Elspeth, constructed it in total silence. No hammering, no shouting, just movement. Perfect, coordinated, hypnotic movement. Grey Haven wasn't just a home. It was a geometry of power, walls that whispered, floors that hummed when no one walked them, mirrors that didn't show your reflection, but showed who you were becoming. Inside, the Riddles lived by a strict doctrine. No, one eats until Ezekiel speaks. No mirrors at night. No blood spilled without purpose. The 7th bell must never be rung. Locals said they never saw the children age. One child, Abigail Riddle, was seen wearing the same red ribbon from 1849 to 1863, with the same face, the same height, the same cold smile. You need to understand something. Ezekiel didn't seek power in the world of men. He rejected it. He had no interest in politics or trade. What he wanted, what he built, was compliance without confrontation. A force so silent, so embedded, that no one even noticed when they gave in. He rewired Pike County, not with fear, but with reverence. Men began to quote him in sermons. Women began to name their children after his. Judges passed laws that mirrored the Riddle House Code. The control wasn't top-down, it was inside-out, a rot disguised as ritual, a devotion mistaken for tradition. And still, no one knew who he was. One theory came from an escaped German mystic who wandered into town raving about a black prince of Europa who fled the Danube with forbidden texts etched on human skin. Another swore Ezekiel was a remnant of the lost Roanoke colony, those who didn't disappear, but transcended. But those are distractions. The truth is simpler. Ezekiel Riddle wasn't from anywhere. He was sent, not by man, not by heaven, but by the idea that some people are born to be followed, and others are born to forget they ever resisted. And if you think that story died with him, you don't understand what Ezekiel really built. Next, we meet his children, and they make him look tame. Legacy. Most families pass down heirlooms, land, maybe a name. The Riddles passed down influence like a genetic curse. Each of Ezekiel's 6 children carried a different part of his doctrine. They weren't taught. They were encoded. Raised not in love, but in strict symbolic ritual. Their meals were silent, their games choreographed. Even their screams had rhythm. Locals called them the Choir of Shadows. Let's meet them. Abigail Riddle, the eldest, the red ribbon girl. She never blinked. Not once in her 74 documented appearances in Pike County records. Her voice, rarely heard, was so sharp it made dogs wail. Abigail never married, never touched another human. And yet 6 women in town claimed to have birthed children who looked exactly like her. She studied mirrors obsessively. Rumor says she could trap people inside them for days. One boy disappeared for a week after mocking her. He came back unable to say his own name. Ezekiel Riddle, the silent brother. He carved a massive book out of oak and human skin, bound with copper wire, and called it the Book of Listening. Not reading, listening. You didn't open it. You held it to your chest. The sounds inside weren't words. They were instructions. Every man who listened for more than 10 minutes went mad. One killed his horse, then himself. Another went to the mines and started digging upward. They found him hanging by his ankles, smiling. Mercy Riddle, the nurse. She ran the county's only infirmary. No credentials, no training. But patients came back better. Not just healed, corrected, phobias erased, memories altered, but always less human. One girl who visited Mercy for a fever returned home unable to feel her mother's touch. Another boy had perfect hearing but never reacted to screams again. Mercy didn't cure. She converted. Solomon Riddle, the preacher. He never opened a Bible. He didn't need to. He spoke from the other tongue, a series of rhythmic clicks and breathing patterns that somehow made listeners weep, repent, or disappear. Entire congregations fell into trances when he spoke. One church service ended with every attendee found outside, naked, kneeling, eyes burned shut. Solomon was last seen walking into the Kentucky hills with 13 men. Only he returned. Lydia Riddle, the twin who had no twin. She claimed to be a twin, but no record of the sibling exists. Still, she spoke in pairs, dressed in mirrors, and claimed to share a heartbeat. Anyone who stayed in her room said they felt watched from the inside out. She often sat at 2 tables at once. How? No one knows. But one photo showed her blinking in 2 directions. She wrote letters in a language no one recognized, until someone from Prague claimed it was an ancient form of pre-Christian legalese used in black courts. Malachi Riddle, the boy who never aged. From the age of 10 to 36, Malachi was identical. Same face, same clothes, same twitch under the left eye. He built mechanical toys that moved without gears, without batteries, just intent. One visitor to Greyhaven described a doll that mirrored his facial expressions before he made them. Malachi reportedly once said, "I don't grow up, I grow inward." Together, the Riddle children formed a closed system of control, not just over Pike County, but over behavior itself. Each one handled a different part of the psyche. Fear, obedience, memory, desire, language, time. They didn't terrorize, they reshaped, quietly, intimately, irrevocably. One could argue Ezekiel built the house, but his children filled it with rules that couldn't be broken, only absorbed. No rebellion, no investigation, and no violence, because when people are remade, they don't fight back. They say every Riddle child died in the same year, 1913, the same week. Some say Sue, Satur. Others say sacrifice. But those who've walked past the ruins of Greyhaven at night say they still hear 6 voices singing in harmony. Not sad, not angry, just waiting. When people talk about evil, they imagine force, blood, chaos, screaming. But true evil doesn't announce itself. It smiles, it bakes bread, it writes letters. Vivian Riddle was the last known direct descendant of Ezekiel. A granddaughter by blood, or perhaps something stranger. Some say the 7th child, born in secret. No birth certificate, no baptism, just a single name written in the back cover of the Book of Listening, scrawled in rust. Vivian, the soft voice. Vivian appeared in 1925 in Pike County, like a shadow that had always been there. No one remembered her arrival. Yet everyone had a story about her. The teacher who said Vivian helped her rearrange the alphabet, and then forgot how to spell her own name. The blacksmith who stopped working metal and began carving crosses into his skin, claiming they weren't sharp enough. A traveling reverend who stayed in her guest room for one night and woke up unable to see himself in mirrors ever again. Vivian didn't speak much, but she wrote constantly. Letters, pamphlets, sermons, diagrams, all by hand, all in the same ink, a thick black-red resin no one could identify. Some say it was tree sap, others say it bled through from underneath the page. Her influence spread subtly. She didn't found a church. She didn't start a movement. She simply invited people to come sit for a while. And once you sat, you never really left. What was Vivian? Some say she was a medium, an echo of the family's old rituals. Others whisper she was what the Riddles were preparing for all along, a vessel. Not for God, not for the devil, but for something older. She spoke once, just once, at a town hall meeting in 1932. The lights blew out. Every watch stopped. The rain froze in mid-air. And when the lights came back, 13 people were on their knees, sobbing. One man was found with his own ear in his mouth, smiling. All Vivian had said was, "We are born in the wrong direction." She began collecting objects, a brass key that opened nothing, but hummed when moonlight touched it. A comb made of infant teeth, a phonograph that played silence louder than sound, a map with no roads, just emotions labeled in cursive, shame, bliss, obedience. She kept them in a wooden box locked with no lock, just the instruction, to open, forget. By 1941, Pike County no longer listed Vivian as a resident. She was simply not in the records. But mail kept arriving to her address, and more disturbingly, people kept answering the door. Travelers, historians, even FBI agents reported arriving at a dilapidated farmhouse and being greeted by a woman who looked like their mother, or their wife, or their favorite teacher growing up. One man left a note before vanishing entirely. She told me I was already inside. Here's the final piece. In 1953, a massive fire swept through eastern Kentucky. It burned 36,000 acres, took 114 lives, destroyed Grey Haven entirely. They never found a cause, no lightning, no accelerant, except, in the fire's center, the epicenter of total destruction, one thing remained untouched, a single red chair, facing away from the flames. Still warm, they tested the seat for DNA. It matched no one in the system, but the name attached to the property, buried in the deed, rewritten 100 times over, was Vivian Riddle. Vivian didn't continue the family legacy. She refined it. She took all the chaos, the ritual, the psychological manipulation, and made it quiet, inescapable. She was the softest thing the Riddles ever made, and the most dangerous. Because people fight monsters, but no one fights comfort. Next, we look at what remained after Vivian. The town changed. The people changed. But the house stayed, and it had plans. You've heard of haunted houses, but Grey Haven was never haunted. It was alive. And like all living things, it had a heart, a rhythm, and a memory. Built in silence. Standing for over 70 years, destroyed by a fire that couldn't touch a single chair. Grey Haven wasn't a place. It was a device. Its walls weren't made from timber alone. Witnesses described the grain of the wood forming patterns, ones that changed when no one was watching. Maps of constellations, geometric sigils, nerve pathways, The walls whispered. The floorboards breathed. And the rooms? They weren't consistent. People swore they'd walk through a hallway and return to a room that had moved. Measurements taken hours apart never matched. Some guests claimed there were no corners, only curves, subtle, unnatural bends that bent thought along with them. But what truly unnerved people wasn't what they saw. It was what they remembered after leaving. Men reported dreams of being back inside the house, walking through corridors made of flesh, being watched by portraits whose eyes wept ink. Women claimed the sound of the front door closing echoed in their bones for days. Children refused to speak after entering, as if something inside the house had spoken first, and louder. Here's where it deepens. Inside Greyhaven was a room no one could find twice. The family called it the archive. Others called it the listening room. Some who entered said it was a library, but with no books, only shelves holding blank objects, hair, teeth, stones wrapped in silk, sealed jars that pulsed like hearts. Each object, when held, brought a memory that wasn't yours. One visitor claimed he remembered being buried alive during a plague in a time he didn't recognize, in a country he'd never been. Another remembered giving birth to twins under a blood moon. Both visitors went mad within weeks, but the true power of Greyhaven is as what happened to those who lived near it. The town began to change. Calendars no longer aligned with the seasons. Time between events became inconsistent. Weddings felt weeks apart from funerals that happened the day before. People began dreaming each other's dreams. A blacksmith confessed to living an entire second life inside his dreams, one where he worked for the Riddles, obeyed them, served them. His hands, upon waking, were calloused in ways he couldn't explain. Even more disturbing, Pike County birth records began to shift. Children listed as born in other towns began appearing as born on Riddle property, with unknown midwives and strange annotations. Names that hadn't existed in census reports for generations began reappearing. Riddle names. Greyhaven was not a structure. It was a seed vault. Not of crops, of identity. It held the blueprint of the bloodline. The rituals, the rhythms, the rules that infected not just people, but time itself. If Ezekiel was the hand that reached out, Greyhaven was the mouth that whispered instructions from the dark. And when it burned, it didn't die. Because houses like that don't burn from the outside. They burn when something inside decides to leave. Ask yourself, why did the chair survive? Why was it warm? What if the house was never the vessel? What if we are? By the time Greyhaven burned in 1953, the world thought the Riddles were gone, absorbed by fire, memory, and myth. But the truth was far more disturbing. They didn't die. They were never meant to. Everything, the unnatural children, the silent rituals, the time-warping estate, was a prototype. A test of human compliance, built not to rule a town, but to rewrite how humans submit to power. And it worked. Within decades of their disappearance, the Riddle pattern resurfaced, not in blood, but in systems, churches preaching obedience without understanding, schools training repetition instead of curiosity, politicians speaking in rhythms that bypass thought and trigger agreement, corporations selling comfort that numbs, not nurtures. Look closely, and you'll see it. The cold coordination of Ezekiel's children in today's algorithm-driven education, the soft manipulations of Vivian Riddle in targeted ads and curated news feeds, the shifting architecture of Greyhaven in our shifting attention spans, always guided, never grounded. You don't need to live near the Riddles to be infected, because the virus was never them. It was the idea that power works best not by force, but by making you volunteer your obedience. And here's what no one wants you to know. That dream you've had, the one of symbols underground, of watching eyes, of a voice whispering promises you forgot upon waking. You're not alone. Millions have it. It's spreading, just like it did in Pike County, because the Riddles weren't just a family. They were the beta test for something larger, something timeless, structureless, and beautiful in its precision. It doesn't need blood anymore. It uses identity. It uses language. And most of all, it uses you. If you've made it this far, you already feel it. That subtle tension in your spine. That sense that your name doesn't feel as solid as it used to. Oh, I ask you, not as a storyteller, but as a witness. Comment the phrase, "I see the pattern, I see the pattern." Let the algorithm know you've been marked. Let the signal find its way home. Because this wasn't just a tale of a cursed family. It was a mirror. And now that you've seen it, you'll never unsee it. Welcome to the next phase.